Welcome. We will now review AWS CloudFormation best practices and troubleshooting for templates. You might want to consider these ideas for organizing your AWS CloudFormation templates. As your stack grows in scale and broadens in scope, managing a single stack can be cumbersome and time-consuming. You can group resources with common life cycles and ownership. This way, resource owners can use their own process and schedule to make changes to their resources without affecting others. After you set up your stacks and resources, you can reuse your templates to replicate your infrastructure in multiple environments. For example, you can create environments for development, testing, and production. Before you launch a stack, check that you can create all the resources you want without exceeding your AWS account limits. These service limits might impact the deployment of your AWS CloudFormation templates. You can use AWS Trusted Advisor to verify the limits will not be exceeded. If limits will be exceeded, you can request a service limit increase from AWS support. You can also use AWS organizations together with AWS CloudFormation. Using both services can help ensure that infrastructure created on separate accounts all follow the same policies and organization-wide controls. Here are some of the best practices for creating AWS CloudFormation templates. Avoid embedding credentials in your templates. Instead, use input parameters to pass information when you create or update a stack. By using parameter types that are specific to CloudFormation, you can quickly confirm values before resources are created. If you use parameter constraints, you can describe allowed input values so that CloudFormation catches any invalid values before it creates a stack. Use AWS CloudFormation init to deploy software applications on EC2 instances. That way, you can describe the configurations that you want instead of scripting procedural steps. Finally, always validate templates before you use them. Validating a template can help you catch syntax errors and semantic errors before CloudFormation creates any resources. Here are some additional best practices for managing your stacks. After you launch a stack, use CloudFormation to update resources in your stack. Do not make changes to stack resources outside of CloudFormation. Doing this can create a mismatch between your stack's template and the current state of your stack resources. This can then cause errors if you update or delete the stack. You should create change sets before you update stacks. With change sets, you can see how proposed changes to a stack might impact your running resources before you implement these changes. AWS CloudFormation doesn't make any changes to your stack until you run the change set. This enables you to decide whether to proceed with your proposed changes or create another change set. Stack policies help protect critical stack resources from unintentional updates. Specify a stack policy when you must create a stack that has critical resources. AWS CloudTrail tracks anyone who makes CloudFormation API calls in your account. To help gather information, enable logging and specify an S3 bucket to store the logs. You can then audit who made which AWS CloudFormation calls in your account. AWS Config can also give you visibility to what changes are being applied to your infrastructure and allow or deny those changes. Finally, use code reviews and version control to manage templates. These methods help track changes between different versions of templates. This in turn helps track changes to stack resources. Also, by maintaining a history, you can revert your stack to a prior version. If AWS CloudFormation fails to create, update, or delete your stack, you can view error messages or logs to help you learn more about the issue. The AWS CloudFormation Troubleshooting Guide is a good place to start when you troubleshoot errors. It provides guidance from the more general to the very specific. One of the first actions recommended by the Troubleshooting Guide is to look for error messages in the AWS CloudFormation console. If the errors occurred on an EC2 instance, you can log into that instance and examine the cloud init and CFN log files. It is common to store AWS CloudFormation templates on Amazon S3, and then specify the S3 location when you choose a template and run a stack. If you receive an error indicating that the template URL must reference a valid S3 bucket, confirm that the bucket exists and that you have permission to access it. Here are some areas to investigate if you try to create an AWS CloudFormation stack and you see an error message that one of the resources failed to create. First, does the user have permission to create that type of resource? Check the IAM policy permissions. Check the level of access that is granted to the user that allows the creation of the resource. Second, verify that there are no missing required parameters for the specified resource type. The easiest way to do this is to look in the JSON or YAML code section in the template where you specify the resource. Then, compare that code against the code that creates the same type of resource and that is known to work. Recall that wait conditions are often used when EC2 instance resources are created. If a wait condition times out or returns an error when you try to create your stack, there is an error in your CloudFormation init code. If the EC2 instance is still accessible after you notice the error, analyze the CFN init log and the CFN wire log for details. You can configure CloudWatch logs to collect the logs from the instance. You could also try running the create stack command again and specify --on--failure do nothing to keep instances from rolling back. This way you can log into the instance and examine the logs. The most common error occurs when files that the CloudFormation init code references cannot be accessed from the instance. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.